Hello and welcome to the Event Bestie, the show that unlocks the magic of event planning by taking you behind and before the scenes. I'm your host, Tanya Hales. In today's episode, I'm chatting with Edward Byers, the founder of Can Rev Collaborative. With over 15 years of association and non-for-profit experience, he's brought in $20 million in new revenue through sponsorship, partnerships, and is the perfect place to start when talking about event sponsorships. This is the one episode where you'll need a pen and paper for, so pull the car over for the next 30 minutes. Safely, of course. Let's get into it. Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Not too bad. I'm very excited for this conversation because, as I've mentioned to you before, this is the number one question that I always got as an event planner. Do you do sponsorships? And the answer was emphatically no. So I'm very excited to talk to a professional who's going to answer the questions so that I can just tell people, please refer to this podcast episode.
Right on. Well, thanks for calling me a professional. That's very nice of you.
Okay, so let's start with a simple question. How did we get here? What's your bio, your journey to getting to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. A good question. My background is, I won't go too far back for people, so it's not 30 minutes in and you're still on my high school days, but I'll start with the relevance of, I did my undergrad degree at Ryerson, formerly Ryerson, now TMU, in hospital. It's a business degree, but in hospitality and tourism. And so I finished and I had jobs throughout my time at school where I was doing events, and I really kind of liked the event world. And I was sort of dead set on getting a job at the Olympics because they were coming to Canada in 2010. And so I finished my degree in 2009 and I flew out. I share this story with the students I teach, but I flew out, and this was probably, I don't know, the fall of 2009, I guess it was, or maybe the summer, anyway, or spring, sorry. And I flew out and I was like, I'm going to put my resume in anywhere that anybody will take it. Like, I'm working for these damn Olympics. I don't care. I'll put them restaurants, hotels, doesn't matter, with VANOC, the organizing committee. I went to, this is before Google Maps really was a thing, but like I had the MapQuest thing and it was raining and I found the VANOC office. And then I was like, I got there soaking wet and I was like, hey, and he's like, what are you here for? I was like, well, I'm here to apply for a job. And he's like, oh no, you can't, you got to apply online. Like, take care. And I was like, I flew here from Ontario, please, like, just take my resume, throw it in the garbage. I don't care, but just please, and nothing. So I ended up going to the employment agency that was also recruiting for a number of jobs for the Olympics. So I got back to Ontario, and I ended up getting a call 2 weeks later. And long story short, I had a job in workforce development in Whistler for the Olympics. And it was a great gig, great pay, condo in Whistler, Blackholm, could ski into the condo. I lucked out. I had a really great job. And so I kind of got hooked. And I share that example for my students that I teach because I'm like, take your career development into your own hands. First of all, that's a separate topic and probably deserves its own podcast. But yes. I went around, I was just like, the guy called me. He's like, your resume landed on my desk. And that's how I got the job. He's like, he actually said, the paper that your resume was printed on is so nice, I had to call you. And I was like, I just printed it at, the Kinko's or whatever. But so I got hooked in the Olympics. I was a bit of a serial games chaser, as they call them. So then I ended up working for Special Olympics. I worked for the London Olympics. And I was doing a number of different event contracts. I worked for TIFF, London Olympics, Special Olympics. I worked for Steam Whistle Brewing in events for a little while. I worked for a commercial real estate association for 5 years doing their events and sponsorship. With Special Olympics, I was looking after sponsorships primarily. So I always found, and then I landed at the CSAE, Canadian Society of Association Executives, doing business development. That's the association for all associations. And then 2 years ago, I started my own business, helping associations and not-for-profits run their sponsorship programs, which includes event sponsorships. And so I've always been a fan of events and sponsorship. So business development and events. So very niche. I tell people, like, what the heck do you do? But it's kind of niche, but it marries the two things that I love, is event and business development. And so selling sponsorship for events is so much fun. I know we're going to get all those questions, but how's that for a long-winded story on how I got to...
Perfect. I call myself a creative storyteller because That's how society progresses. We always tell stories. We tell our kids stories to get them to go to bed. So I
Mhm.
love a good story. I was riveted. I was just like, oh my gosh, did he get the job? And it
Yeah.
turned out like
What's he gonna do
super.
next?
I know, right? I was just like, where's the story going? I was riveted. I loved it.
Yeah,
So what
awesome.
keeps you excited? I know it's marrying the two things that you love the most, but what keeps you excited about your role in supporting events in this particular way, as opposed to, there's so many ways to be in the event industry, but this is very, like you said, it's very niche. So what keeps
Yeah,
what keeps the jam going?
yeah, I love it because I was doing event planning for a while, and then I had kids, and I did the whole thing, married and kids, and so I found it was like the travel and the amount of like I started to kind of go, I love events still, but I don't necessarily want to be the lead planner on all these things. Like it's just there's so much, as any event planner listening will know, geez, there's a lot to do. And
Yes.
so I was like, how can I marry the two, but also stay involved in events and do what I really like to do? And that was, bringing in money for events so they could host killer events.
Yes.
And so still having a hand in, but not necessarily planning all of the elements
Mhm.
that sort of come with the planning, event planning. So yeah, so I mean, it is fun. I still get to stay involved, and the sponsorship element is, we're probably going to talk about this, but the sponsorship element people sort of think of as a necessary evil, and it isn't. It's like it enhances events. Like sponsorship can make your event like 1,000 times better, not only from the financial side, but leveraging the sponsor's brand and activations, and so people really thinking of it as like we just need the money, but it's like, well, how can we leverage what the sponsor is doing to? So it's a way to be involved, but not necessarily own the entire event, if that makes sense.
That's great. I was actually chatting with someone earlier this week, an episode that's going to come out, and I nicknamed her the event closer. Just some very similar. She's like, I don't think an Excel spreadsheet. She's like, give me a task, I will come in, I will execute the task, and I'm gonna
Yeah.
be out. I'm also having a very Olympics week because she was at Paris Olympics and has done Olympics in the past. So this is a very Olympiad week for me, and I love it. Um,
Amazing.
Before we move on to Act Two and the nitty gritty of it all, do you have an event that you're most proud of? I mean, the Olympics started it all, and that's a really high place to start. I feel like everything from there is probably just like, but
Yeah.
you have one that stands out that's not the Olympics.
Yeah. Well, the funniest thing is the sports side of it's good, and I work with the client now. We work with Wheelchair Basketball Canada, which is an amazing group, and we were just in Paris during the teams on the men's and women's senior national team, and so you still get to I still get to be a little bit involved, but the Paralympics and Olympics are pretty awesome. It's kind of hard to top. I
Mm,
think any event, the events, they're all pretty great in their own way. Like we just did an event with the we were doing sponsorship for with the Journalists for Human Rights, and we had
mm,
a Nobel laureate, Dmitry Muratov, come in, with a very impressive story. He's from Russia, and is leading the opposing newspaper in Russia, and media outlet, and so very cool, right? Totally different,
right.
very interesting, fascinating, and you get to see the work. My work specifically is in associations and not for profits, and so you get to see the work that they do, and it's pretty amazing. So every group is very different, and every group is so different, and they're all awesome for their own reasons. And so yeah, the sport world pretty awesome, and it's hard to top, but other groups are doing pretty amazing stuff too, and being a part of it is pretty great.
Nice. I love that. Act Two, we are going to get into it. And I realize I didn't write this question down, but it's probably the best place to start. What exactly is event sponsorship? What does it entail? And, it's more than just, hey, company X, give me money. Okay. And then, people have a ton of misconceptions. And I'm like, I'm here to set the record straight for the people.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah, no, I think it's a good question to start with. I think when I look at sponsorship in totality, I think about sponsorship as the act of sort of exchanging. you know, commercial goods, like giving money for commercial. I think there is a term for it. It's like commercial exploitation of something. Like you have a thing, there's a definition for it, and it's
Mhm.
escaping me exactly at the moment. But you're trading goods and services, right? It's like you're purchasing something for something, and so what does that mean? And so when we break it down from sponsorship up here to event related sponsorship, fundamentally, it's a way for companies to align with a brand, and in a way that also adds the personal element. So being in a room with people that you want to be in front of or be with, or be at and part of. So on the Paralympic side, Olympic side, you look at the sponsors there, like it's a brand, it's branding, it's being associated with that brand, and it's on-site activations, and so it kind of depends. Every conversation that I have with every prospective sponsor is, what do you want out of this relationship? Do you want brand awareness? Do you want leads? Do you want speaking time? Do you want thought leadership? What do you want out of this event? And so event sponsorship is just aligning it's like aligning your mission with a brand, or vice versa. It's like taking a brand that you think is aligned with what you're doing
Mhm.
and weaving them into your event. And it's not just cut me a check. And I had a group once that was like, we're having an event in November and it's September. How much money can you bring in? And I'm like, none, because it's 2 months out. But it's like sometimes groups think this endless bag of money that, oh, they should just want to sponsor. So, well, why? And
Right.
B, what do we have to offer as an organization? And how do you best align it? And what is the sponsor? I mean, you're going to hear this a lot these days of, what does the sponsor want? And it's true. It's like, what are the sponsor objectives? Like, that's the first question you want to ask. Like, hey, if you're Wyatt, you just took my call. Well, why did you take my call? Like, what did you think was that? Like, what
Mhm.
enticed you to be on this phone call with me about a potential sponsorship? And then work from there. But yeah, event sponsorship is aligning the brands, and you have something that a brand may want to be a part of. And the big piece with events, which is the most exciting part, is that they get to be in the room with your people. Like, that's
Mhm.
the biggest piece, is they're like, I want to be there. I want to be at your event. I want to be part of it. Versus other kinds of sponsorship, like webinars or branding, or things where they're not actually touching and feeling and
Mhm.
experiencing. It's the fun and piece. It's like the fun sponsorship in a way.
Yeah, for sure. And I think what's so important there is, and especially since your current expertise level is with association and nonprofits, I'm sure a ton come to you and it's just like, oh, because it's a good cause. Well, every nonprofit
Mm,
that exists is also a good cause. So
exactly.
it's not about philanthropy, it's about marketing. And that is the number one thing. And I think everyone, whether they're for profit or nonprofit, needs to understand that. This is a relationship that is about marketing. It is not about, well, it's a good cause and you should. Now, can you lean into certain things? Like, look at the WNBA right now. 5 years ago, they were struggling to get partners because partners were like, well, there's no eyeballs. Now all the eyeballs are there. Now all those partners are like, this is great. And it leans into the gender equity side. And like, if it hits other boxes like social good, great. But their number one thing is, I want to be seen, be in front of all these millions of new extra eyeballs who are dropping money on jerseys and going to games and all these other things. That's what it's about. It's not about the good. You should do it because it's a good thing, because that no
And
for-profit company cares.
no, it's all about ROI. It's about ROI. What am I getting out of this relationship? And also, there's there's some things where I find where you go to a company, and if it's philanthropy versus marketing and sponsorship. So sometimes they cross over a little bit. But to your point, it's like, if it's a philanthropic cause and it aligns with their corporate pillars, and they're like, yeah, we do care about these things,
Yes.
and it's a give back. If it's a different approach, it's a different person, it's a different ask than saying, hey, we've got all kinds of ROI for you on this side. That comes from your marketing, branding, sponsorship, biz dev budget. This is like, hey, we're an organization that does good, and this is how we do good.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the groups that we work with have a bit of both. Like it is sometimes where you're like, should this be a sponsorship or should this be a donation?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and identifying that, if it's harder to identify an ROI, like an immediate ROI, then maybe you look towards the philanthropy side. But anyway, yes, I hear what you're saying.
Nice. So, what is the number one thing event hopefuls, and this is for people who are either already in the industry or want to throw an event or are throwing events and, again, like, oh, I'm not getting any sponsors, there's no bites. What's the number one thing they get wrong about event sponsorship?
I think the biggest thing that I see is people thinking that like, oh, this company needs to be like having an assumption about a company that is like, why wouldn't they want to be part of this? Because I think you had said it earlier, they probably have been pitched 1,000 times. Like they've probably been pitched that day already by somebody else, or they've
Mm-hmm.
received a donation, or they're not donation, they've received a sponsorship request form online, like probably 5 a day. I don't know, but
Mm-hmm.
I think having an assumption that they have to be part of your event. Take that out and start thinking about why. Call it the WIFM. What's in it for me? What's in it for me as a sponsor? If you start to have that lens, you might look at your event a little differently, and you might approach it sponsorship solicitation and sponsorship generally like a little bit differently. So I think that I see, and I think that yeah, I think the two fundamental principles are what's in it for the sponsor, what are their objectives, and can you meet that? And sometimes you can't. Sometimes you're like, wow, they really want a lot, their budget isn't there, and it doesn't make sense. They have $1,000, but it's going to cost me 2,000 in staff time and all the rest of it. Like, doesn't really make sense. It's going to be more work than we're getting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you'll hear a lot about the standard uh, packages, like the gone is the gold, silver, bronze, and all the rest of it. I would say gold, silver, bronze is maybe gone, but there is still some companies still like want a bit of prescriptive things. Like
Yeah.
you don't have to give them like this is exactly what you get, but sometimes they're like, give me some kind of framework or guidance on where I can put my money. But anyway, sorry, you've asked me one thing and I'm down over here
Nope.
uh
Give it
talking about
all
this.
to the people. This is very
Right.
important.
Yeah.
I think I actually was surprised because I was expecting you to say like the time frame because you would refer to someone who was it's like our event's in November and they reach out to you in
Oh
September.
yeah.
But it also does make sense because with everything to do with events, you have to start with the why. The
Yeah.
why is the most important, not the where or the what or the when. It has to start with the why. And it's like, why should this company X choose you over the multitude of other companies? You think Procter and Gamble doesn't get 17 a day and, all the Fortune 500 companies, maybe that's what I need to do. I also need to talk to a company that does
Yeah.
sponsorships just so that people can be like, guys, this is what they're dealing with. It's probably someone who's not on this full time. It's on the side of their desk. They review those emails probably once a week. And, if you're not short, sweet, to the point, you know, something pops about your application, that's what you're dealing with. But I think that that's really important to keep in mind, not just your why, but also the sponsor's why.
100%. And it is true though, you say about timelines. That is probably another thing that for folks to think about is like, I'm like, give me a year out. Like, don't give me 2 months out. Like, plan and get organized, have your materials ready. Like, if you know it's an annual event, like book it, like book the date. You don't have to have everything sort of sorted, but
Mm-hmm.
don't wait until 5 months out. And then when budgets are set and it's no, for sure timing is because it's an afterthought, because sometimes
Mm-hmm.
sponsorship is an afterthought. And so again, on the why comment, like, are we going to do this? Why are we going to do it? Why is it important to sponsors? Are we going to invest in this as a program, or are we going to make it an afterthought and go, oh, geez, we're 50K short on our event. Let's just go get some sponsors. Like that's yeah, it's a framework. It's a frame of mind, right?
Yes.
So do you want to integrate sponsorship into your event or don't you? And if you do, then plan for it.
Mm. It's wild to me, because I mean, maybe it's because I've been doing this for a really long time too, on both sides of the fence, right? I've been the person asking. I've worked for charities and nonprofits. I run a charity, nonprofit organization. I've been on the brand side. Like I've literally
Yeah.
been on all aspects of it, and for people who are just like, oh, we're short, and I'm like, but did you start with a budget? Because that
Yeah.
shouldn't be like where how I'm like, you signed I had a client who she signed with a hotel before she hired me, and I was like, okay, I don't those are the hardest contracts to get out of. So
Yeah.
I'm like, if you are not selling the way that you think, and then she had to deal with, it was 2021, so it was like the world's open, but not really. And then the
Yeah.
world reclosed. So she still had to pay 30K
Mm.
to move the event. I didn't even say cancel. I just wanted to move to another date. And they're like, yeah,
Oh,
you still have to pay the cancellation
okay.
fee. And I was just like, that's old. But
Yeah.
it was, it was a really struggle, but it cannot be an afterthought. My brain doesn't compute that because I don't want the stress of, I
No.
have to use my rent to pay this
Yeah.
thing. Like,
Yes. Totally. No, it's a good point. Yeah. No, no. Being organized is, I mean, well, being organized is a life skill generally, but
Mhm.
yeah, totally.
So what are your other pet peeves about this aspect of events with sponsorship and the asks that you get? Are there general things that just keep coming up that you're like, the people knew that this was annoying?
Yeah, no, I don't think. I think it's a learning curve for some folks who may not be like
Mm,
running events and selling sponsorship are two very different skill sets. Sometimes you can possess both, but they're very different people. Like not a lot of people like asking for money. Like
mhm.
it's not like it's a hard skill, I suppose. Um, but but no, I think the things that we had just talked about are kind of the main ones. Is like, just be organized. Do you want to run the program? How are you going to run it? Get ahead of it and don't wait and don't kind of be like, we need 50 grand, yeah. If you're going to pull in a sponsorship expert, don't pull them in 3 months out. Like, I always say, I'm like, 3 months out, there's zero happening, but I will help plan for the next year.
Right.
Like that's like getting in 3 months is really just testing the waters to see what you're doing. And then
Mhm.
if we get one or two, great. But there should be no expectations that 3 months out you're gonna save the event. That's a pet peeve for me. Is it's like,
Mm,
hey, we're a month out. Can you come in and save this? And I'm like I'm not I'm not a silver bullet here. It's really just it's building the strategy. Also, the other thing to think about is that sponsorship requests and asks shouldn't always rest with one person. Like the fund development as a key function is everybody's responsibility. And I try my best when working with groups to be like, it is everybody's responsibility because if it's a warm ask from the CEO, use the CEO. It doesn't have to come from me or somebody else in the organization. Use the people that are in your network um, to make those asks and
yeah.
make those introductions. So do what you got to do. It's not like hey, you didn't raise enough money or you didn't bring enough sponsorship. It's a team. Like try and make it your best to make it a team effort.
Mm. Yeah, I was gonna say, how do you deal with, okay, so someone has come to you, whether it's within the time frame or not, the expectations that they have. Well, I've hired you to do this
Yeah.
thing, to hit a number or to hit, a certain amount of revenue, and you don't. How do you manage that?
Yeah, and sometimes it's setting expectations, and sometimes you don't, and sometimes it's there's usually multiple factors at play, like budgets, and you can't make people give you money. Like
Right.
it is what it is. Like it's value, and so there's so many elements. This is one of the things that I don't do is like commission only sales because it's like there's so many variables. Like
Yeah.
your product, like there, you can only sell something that people really want. I think, creating I always call it the cool kids club, creating using marketing, which is not my skill, but where people want to come to you, where you get inbound leads, creating an
Mm,
environment or an event where people are like, oh my God, I gotta be a part of that. So
yes.
like if you don't have that, then they're trying to sell something that nobody really wants. So um I think you bring everybody into the table. Like I do this where we like bring in the board and I'm like, every board member's got to find a sponsor. Or,
Mm,
like like if you can't, as a board member who's totally invested in this organization, can't sell one thing or bring in one lead, how would you expect me as a person who's outside of this organization to bring in 100 leads? Like it's not selling sponsorship isn't rocket science. It is a bit of relationships, but they either want it or they don't.
yeah.
It's not like a super hard sell. It's like, you want to be part of this event, we'll create something for you to be a part of. But leveraging the people around the table that have been there for a long time, like they have those relationships. The CEO is the number one best salesperson in any organization. Always, they're going to do way
Mm.
better than me. always, because they're the CEO. They know the people. They know the organization better than anybody else. And so leverage those folks because it doesn't have to be you out there selling, but you can. That's how I manage it. I facilitate the program. So it's like
Right.
we're all doing this together. So how do we do it? I don't need to be the person that takes any glory for any big wins. It's the big wins are shared together.
Yep.
If you get 10 and I get 5 and then I get another 20 and then you get another 5, it all adds up. And so I'm here to help facilitate your program and use the channels and the levers that we have as a group to bring in the most amount of money for you.
That is such a huge tidbit there in terms of it is still a team effort. Even if someone hires you, it's not like, great, we've checked off the box. We have an event planner
Exactly.
planning the event. Great. We have an event sponsorship person who's going to secure
Yeah.
bags. No, like you still have to be
Yeah.
involved. And, I could talk a lot about boards who they're on boards for,
Yeah.
their own clout building and ego building, and they don't fundraise or they don't donate. And it's just like, then you're not a board member. You're
Yeah.
really just here taking up space. So definitely for any nonprofit out there, no matter how big your board is or small, everyone's got a network, right? Especially as you get
Totally.
older and more established in a career in industry. But the CEO being the biggest seller,
Yeah.
is such a really interesting point for sure. No, this has been fantastic.
Yeah, I'm
So
glad I've got some nuggets. I'm glad there's been some nuggets.
but I knew that there was going to be. Like, I had no doubts. I love it so much. Part 3, we're going to talk the secret sauce because we're going to drop some gems. People are like, that's great, Tanya, fantastic. Thank you so much, Ed. Cool. But if I can't afford to hire an Ed, or I'm just a one-man show or whatever it is, what's the secret sauce for me? So what is the first thing people should do when seeking event sponsorship besides hiring you if they can afford to hire you?
Yeah, I think it's just look at your event and look at what opportunities might be there for potential sponsors. And I think look at your competitors. Like go out and be like, okay, who's doing similar things? Do they have sponsors? What are they charging? What are they doing? So if you're a small event, you're like, okay, I don't have the total resources, but I think, look, I could give you a really complicated answer, but for people listening, it's like, just go and look what other people are doing. And geez, Chat GPT can write you a sponsorship prospectus now. Might not be exactly what you want, but probably pretty close.
Right.
Like, so, use AI, use the tools, look what other people are doing and think, okay. And then chat with your event stakeholders, like ask 3 of them and be like, or ask 3 companies that you think might be interested and be like, hey, I'm building a sponsorship program. Is this something you would be interested? There's a line that says, ask for advice, people will give you money. Ask for money, people will give you advice. So it's like, go and ask people. Be like, hey, Pfizer, you want to don't go and ask them for money, but go and ask them, be like, hey, I'm building a sponsorship program. I'm using Pfizer as an example, but if you have existing relationships with companies that come to your event or that are coming that you might be there, that have never been asked for money, go and ask them, be like, I'm thinking about building a sponsorship program. What would you like to see in it? And I'm not putting you on the spot to sponsor. I'm just asking for advice. I want to know, what would you want to see in it? What would be valuable to you? Is this something that you would ever consider? Like, it's going to be for next year, but I'm just thinking about it. What do you think? Ask 3 companies that are in your network that you might think, and you'll be surprised. And then you'd be like, okay, I've got something here. Then the rest is sort of the fun part. It's like, do you have an opportunity for sponsorship? That's the fundamental question that you just got to ask yourself and figure out. And if you do, the pricing of it and the opportunities and the activations, that's easy. That's just things on a sheet. It's like, I could do this. Okay, it's going to cost me X. What do I need from a sponsor? Like, that part's all you can figure out. It's don't waste all your time building a big sponsorship program and then go out and be like, I got this whole thing. Great, it's going to sell. And then you go out there and nobody wants it. It's like, well, wait a second. I should have probably asked a few people first before I went out and did it. Make sense?
No, absolutely. I love that because I think at the end of the day, what a light bulb it just gave for me is also if you are an event that has already taken place, look at your guest list, because if there's
Yeah,
people who use their work email address to
totally.
go, that means their work let them go. So that person's employer is invested in their employees going. So that might also be like, oh, okay, 7 people from one company came to this thing. Maybe there's a potential alignment there, right? Like
Totally.
there's there's
100%.
and you don't need a full event. If your event is going to cost you 50K, everyone always wants the 150K sponsor. I'm just like, or break it down
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
225 or
Totally.
5 10s. It is easier to get 10K than it is to get 50. And most
Yeah.
companies don't want to be the only fully funded
Yes.
funder thing. Like
Totally.
if you are like, oh, the event's going to cost you 50K, they're just like, well, who else do you have on board? And if we don't come in at your 50, does that mean your event? No one wants the pressure of being the only
Yes.
to help prop up your event. They don't want that anymore. So, break it out. Like, do you want a food and beverage sponsor? Do you want an entertainment sponsor? Do you want a speaker sponsor? Like, you don't have to just have the one with the grid and the gold, silver, bronze and these things. And if you have to know what the cost of those activations are before you make your sponsorship package, because promise you're going to be real upset if they got
Totally.
you a check and then your activation costs you double the amount and now you're short, which makes no sense.
Totally. Yeah. No, I think, yeah, you hit on a couple of things there that I think even looking at the list of if you've got 10 people from one company, reach out to them and be like, I'll offer you a sponsorship, which includes a 10 pass ticket bundle. So it's like, okay, like you're going to get that for that same price plus only another $3,000. We'll call you a sponsor
Yeah,
and we'll do a couple of things for you. Anyway, yeah, I like it.
love it. Love it. So, last question. What is the future of event sponsorships? I'm sure, you've seen such a wide
Yeah.
range. It was like we've talked about the gold, silver, bronze package. We've talked about, companies are scrutinizing a heck of a lot more than they used to. The ROI, you can't just lie and say, oh, we're gonna give
Yeah.
you this amount of, this many
Impressions and
attendees or
eyeballs. Totally.
impressions. Like they're getting smarter.
Oh, yeah.
So what is the future of event sponsorship, do you think?
I think the future's still bright. I think it's really bright. I think there's opportunities now. People, especially post COVID, people want to be in the same room as other people, and they want to be, pressing flesh and hanging out and like chatting with people. And maybe not the best expression, but they want to be rubbing elbows. They want to be hanging with each other, and they want to
Yeah.
be out there and connecting. And so that's a big ROI for people still. And maybe the biggest one, like trade shows are still big, and conferences are still big, and events are still big. And so creating value, if you've got a captive audience, to me, it's like they're two different things. It's like you can give the brand impressions and the ROI on that have metrics that I think are great, but also they're they don't give you the not the warm and fuzzies, but the that anecdotal stuff, which still
Yes.
people make decisions on. People make
Yes.
anecdotal decisions based on gut feeling. And they're like, I went to that event and I had a really good conversation. And I knew I know for next year I want to be a part of that.
Hmm.
So and it's a fun way to bring somebody's brand to life. So I don't see it going anywhere. I don't know. I mean, hopefully not, knock on wood, for me, but I think it's a great space. I think the future is totally bright. And I think it's a marriage of the two. It's as we start using, technology more and more and more, there's ways to sort of do both. It's like, I don't know if there'll be a reversion back to be like, oh my gosh, I'm totally teched out. I want to just be in a room with somebody and talk to them. Like,
Mm.
but I think there's always going to be a bit of a marriage of like, being a part of something and being in a room with people. And that's still where deals get done, believe it or not. That's still where things happen. And
Yep.
so it's still a great option for organizations to be a part of. It's harder to track some of it maybe in some cases,
Mm.
but but it could provide much better value.
Mm.
That makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Ed, this was fantastic. Like I knew it would be. I'm sure I could ask you 9,000 more questions, but the podcast is short and sweet for a reason
Yeah,
because, people have the
perfect.
attention span of a gnat
Yeah.
and there's children and there's dinner to make and there's laundry to fold. So, give folks, the basics of what they need to hear. And of course, they can follow you and find you on the socials and on the interwebs. I'm sure I'm going to be sending some people your way because people keep asking me, and I'm like, I got nothing for you. But talk to Ed a year out.
Perfect.
Thank you so much for taking the time for being on the podcast with me. Thank you to the listeners for listening. If you liked it, share with a person who keeps complaining about no sponsors at their events and needs to hear this. Please and thank you. And till next time, we'll keep the red carpet ready for you.